On the silver screen, Clint Eastwood is the embodiment of coldness, ruthlessness, and invincibility. He is an icon of control, the man of steel that all of Hollywood holds in high regard. But there lies an ironic truth when the studio lights fade and the bedroom doors close. That same hero becomes a pathetic loser in his own life. There are no gunshots, yet Clint's romantic battles are more fierce and brutal than any Western film. Would you believe that this powerful man was once sued for fraud by his lover of 13 years and kicked out of his house like a homeless person? He helplessly watched his second wife turn their private sanctuary into a pandemonium on reality television and lived in fear for 25 years to keep a secret daughter in the shadows. They were not enemies. They were the six muses who passed through his life, leaving scars that even time cannot erase. Today, let's set aside the cinematic glory to step into the real world of Clint Eastwood, where he admits the truth about the worst lovers he has ever had to face. Sandra Locke, the ghost contract, and the most ruthless litigation in Hollywood love history. Thick fog from Monterey Bay begins to spill into the Carmel Valley, covering Mission Ranch in a hazy, opaque white. At the age of over 90, Clint Eastwood sits alone on an old leather armchair by the fireplace, holding a film script he is reading halfway through. The surrounding space is absolutely quiet, with only the sound of dry wood popping in the furnace. He takes off his reading glasses, massaging his tired eyes, in the moment of closing his eyes to find relaxation. A piercing sound from the past suddenly rings out in his head, the sound of a metal drill grinding into oak wood. That was not the sound from any construction site, but an echo from April 10, 1989. The day he committed the biggest mistake in his private life when confronting Sandra Locke. Clint remembers that day vividly. Back then, he was at the peak of power in Hollywood, used to everything obeying his will like a director commanding on set. The relationship between him and Sandra Locke had lasted 13 years, a time long enough for people to think of eternity, but also long enough for underground cracks to destroy everything. Sandra was not just a lover, she was also his compatible co-star in a series of classic movies like The Outlaw Josie Wales or Sudden Impact. But when love ran dry, Clint chose the coldest, most ruthless way to resolve it. True to the style of the cowboys, he often played cutting ties without a word of explanation. That day, Sandra was busy directing the movie Impulse at another studio. Clint, with ruthless decisiveness, ordered staff to come to their shared home in Bel Air. He had people collect all of Sandra's clothes and personal belongings, pack them into cardboard boxes, and pile them up outside the door. After that, he called a locksmith. The drilling sound of changing the lock rang out shrilly, signaling the termination of a decade-long romance. When Sandra returned after a tiring day of work, she found herself standing in front of the familiar house, but the key in her hand had become useless. She was thrown out onto the street in the literal sense, treated by the man she loved most like an illegal intruder. But Clint underestimated Sandra Locke too much. He thought she would quietly leave, take a sum of compensation money, and disappear like the women before. He was mistaken. That act of roughly changing the house locks did not make Sandra afraid. Instead, it ignited a fury that turned her into the most formidable opponent Clint ever clashed with. Sandra did not cry or beg. She did the thing Clint hated most. She filed a lawsuit. The legal battle broke out right after that, dragging on persistently and more exhaustingly than any action movie he ever participated in. Sandra sued Clint to demand palimony rights, an allowance for a person living together for a long time like a spouse. All of Hollywood was shaken. Clint Eastwood, the symbol of privacy and masculinity, was suddenly dragged before the court, having the most private details about his philandering habits and authoritarian control exposed. He felt like he was being stripped naked before the public, a feeling of humiliating shame. However, the most painful punch that Sandra landed on Clint was the fraud lawsuit that took place a few years later. To get Sandra to withdraw the initial lawsuit, Clint helped her get a directing contract worth $1.5 million with Warner Brothers. Sandra agreed, thinking she would have a chance to develop her career. But then she discovered the harsh truth: Warner Bros. Never had the intention of making her movies. Clint had secretly paid out of his own pocket to pay the studio, turning that contract into a ghost agreement just to keep her legs tied and shut her mouth. Sandra was deceived into sitting and playing, being sidelined, her career frozen in resentment. When the truth broke out, Sandra sued Clint a second time for fraud. This time, she was determined to fight to the end. In front of the court, that small woman looked straight at Clint and said a sentence that obsessed him forever. "I don't need your money, I need my honor and the right to work." Clint Eastwood sighed softly, placing the script sheet on his lap. He recalled the moment of having to accept a settlement outside of court, spending a huge amount of money at the last minute to avoid a verdict that could ruin his reputation. Sandra Locke was the only woman who dared to stand up against him, dared to drag him into the light, and forced him to admit his manipulation. She proved that, in love, cruelty can kill emotions, but lies will kill an entire human being. And to Clint, Sandra is forever an aching legal scar, reminding him that the person holding the gun is not always the winner, especially when the opponent is a woman driven to a dead end. Maggie Johnson, the invisible wife, and the $25 million price for betrayal. The fire in the furnace at Mission Ranch has begun to die, leaving only embers glowing with a weak warmth. Clint Eastwood reached out to hold the fire poker, gently brushing the pile of ashes to one side. That action was slow and heavy, exactly like how he once tried to brush away the memories of his first marriage that lasted more than 3 decades. If Sandra Locke was a fierce fire burning everything down, then Maggie Johnson, the wife who shared his pillow since the time of poverty, was like an iceberg, cold, quiet, and sinking the ship of their marriage in a numbness of silence. Clint leaned back in the chair, his eyes looking far away into the dark void outside the window. He remembered the year 1953 when he was just an unknown young man, with no career, no halo. Maggie Johnson appeared in his life through a blind date, bringing intellectual beauty, gentleness, and the stability that a young guy craved. She was a secretary, a model, and most importantly, she was the only one who believed in him when the whole world did not know who Clint Eastwood was. They married on the occasion of Christmas, a beginning that seemed the warmest and most fulfilling. However, the tragedy of this marriage did not come from fiery arguments or dishes flying around. It came from Maggie's terrifying resignation to Clint's uncontrollable philandering nature. Right from the first year of living together, when Clint started having a bit of fame with the role of cowboy Rowdy Yates in Rawhide, other women began surrounding him, and Clint, with the instinct of a conqueror, never said a word of refusal. Their house gradually became a grave bearing unspoken secrets. Maggie knew it all. She knew the nights Clint did not return home, the filming trips that lasted unusually long, and even the strange perfume smells lingering on her husband's shirt. But instead of being jealous or making a scene, she chose silence, a silence that was forgiving to the point of being cruel to herself. She accepted living in the open marriage shell that Clint implicitly imposed, where he freely adventured in love outside, while she stayed home maintaining the image of a model happy family. Clint recalled the family dinners. The atmosphere on the dining table was always heavy and stifling. Maggie was still solicitous, still caring for the children thoughtfully. But in her eyes, there was no longer the sparkle of love, only tired endurance. She was like an invisible wife in her own house. The peak of the hurt was when Clint publicly associated with other roses right on the film set, even having illegitimate children. While Maggie still bore the title of official wife, Clint's coldness was like a dull knife, cutting day by day into the self-esteem of the woman who spent her entire youth waiting for him. The marriage dragged on sluggishly in an underground rift for over 30 years, like a chronic disease with no cure. Clint realized that the terribleness in this relationship was not the attack, but the indifference. He had turned Maggie into a reluctant audience member, forced to witness her husband's romantic dramas from the very first row without being allowed to speak up. Maggie never blamed him half a word, but that very resignation made Clint feel more suffocated than any accusation. In 1984, when the final divorce petition was signed, Maggie Johnson walked out of Clint's life with a record compensation sum at that time, $25 million. Many people said she won big. But sitting here, in the quiet late night of old age, Clint understands that no amount of money can buy back the 30 years of youth that Maggie lost in loneliness. She won financially, but he and she both lost in each other's lives. Clint closed his eyes. The sound of the wind hissing outside the window sounded like the sigh of his ex-wife. He realized that the wound Maggie left for him was not hatred, but the lingering guilt of a man who used his selfishness to erode the soul of the woman who loved him most. That is a sentence of conscience that no court can pronounce, and he must carry it until the end of his life. Dina Ruiz, the stab that crushed the cowboy's privacy. Clint Eastwood left the armchair by the fireplace, the sound of joints cracking reminding him of the burden of age. He walked slowly toward the small bar in the corner of the room, pouring himself a glass of water. The room was completely silent. Not a single sound other than the wind hissing softly outside Mission Ranch. For a man who spent his whole life on noisy film sets full of explosions and shouting, this silence is the most luxurious thing. He treasures it, protects it like a treasure. But that very appreciation stirs up in him a bitterness when remembering his second marriage to Dina Ruiz, the woman who turned his peaceful sanctuary into the noisiest and most chaotic, broken market. The flow of memory took Clint back to 1993 when he met Dina for the first time. She was a young, dynamic TV reporter full of vitality, unlike the quietness to the point of sadness of Maggie or the fierceness of Sandra. Dina brought Clint a fresh new breeze. He thought he had found the final landing place, a wife who knew how to balance work and family. They married in 1996 and had peaceful years at Carmel, where Clint believed he could hide his private life behind solid fences, far away from the prying eyes of Hollywood. The tragedy began to kindle when Dina's ambition collided violently with Clint's core life principles. In 2012, Dina came up with the idea of producing a reality TV show named Mrs. Eastwood and Company. Her purpose was to promote the boy band Overtone that she was managing, and simultaneously bring the Eastwood family image closer to the public. To Clint, a man belonging to the old generation, who always believed that mystery is the key of a movie star, this idea was no different than a declaration of war. He hated to the bitter end the type of cheap fame of the Kardashian family, where every private corner is exposed in exchange for ratings. But to please his wife, or perhaps because he wanted to be left in peace, Clint nodded reluctantly, and that was when the nightmare began. His private house in Carmel, once an impregnable fortress, was suddenly invaded by a strange army. Trucks carrying equipment parked full in the yard, cables tangled all over the floor, lights shining brightly in every corner, and strange cameramen walking swaggeringly in the living room. The quiet space he worshipped was broken by the sound of acting direction, loud laughter, ho-ho, and naked dramas staged for the camera. Clint felt like he was a superfluous person, an uninvited guest right in his own home. He frequently had to hide in his office or wander on the golf course to avoid the faces of the camera crew. In the rare times appearing on the show, the audience saw a completely different Clint Eastwood, not the arrogant cowboy or powerful director, but a sullen, grumpy old man lost among a crowd of noisy women. The image of the cinematic legend was trivialized, turned into a background for the petty troubles of his wife and children. He felt his self-esteem was seriously wounded. The conflict in life values created a crack that could not be healed. Dina craved the halo of showbiz. She wanted to show off the wealth and lifestyle of the Eastwood family. Conversely, Clint just wanted to eat a quiet dinner without a camera lens pointing at his face. He realized that Dina did not just bring cameras into the house, she also sold cheap his privacy, his most precious asset, in exchange for frivolous fame. The program Mrs. Eastwood and Company did not last long, but the consequences it left were persistent. Arguments became more frequent. Clint could not stand his wife being engrossed in chasing ratings while abandoning traditional family values. In 2013, the marriage ended in the astonishment of the public, dragging along strange troubles when Clint and Dina got involved in a spouse-swapping relationship with the photographer Scott Fisher and his wife. But for Clint, the biggest pain was not the separation, but the feeling of being betrayed in terms of life ideals. Standing by the window looking out at the pitch-black night of Carmel, Clint drank up the glass of water. He breathed a sigh of relief. No more cameras, no more glaring lights, no more strangers prying in the living room. Silence has returned, complete and safe. Dina Ruiz might not be a bad person, But she is the clearest proof, showing that when two opposing ideologies live under one roof, the result will always be collapse. Frances Fisher, the cruel and uncompromising custody battle. The night outside Meshin Ranch seemed to become thick, swallowing the ancient oak trees into its belly. Clint Eastwood left the window frame, walked slowly toward the large mahogany desk placed in the middle of the room. He ran his hand over the family photo frames arranged neatly. His eyes stopped at the photo of his beautiful and personality-filled daughter, Francesca. Her radiant smile in the photo made Clint's old heart soften a bit. But right after that, it stirred up another dull pain, a pain that did not come from coldness or ostentation, but came from a war he hated most in the world, the war for fatherhood, with the woman with hair red like fire, Frances Fisher. Clint put the photo down, sat heavily onto the chair, letting memories drift back to the early years of the 90s. At that time, after the stormy breakup with Sandra Locke, Clint found comfort in Frances Fisher. She was a talented, intelligent actress who possessed a sharp, strong beauty. They met on the film set of Pink Cadillac, and the fire of love quickly flared up fiercely. Frances was not the type of woman who only knew how to rely on others. She had her own career and an independent personality that made Clint respect her. That period seemed to be the most fulfilling golden age of Clint. In 1993, his movie Unforgiven won big at the Oscars, bringing him the Best Director Golden Statue, standing on the peak of career glory. And in that same year, he welcomed the birth of his daughter, Francesca. For the first time in his life, Clint was truly present in the delivery room, holding Frances's hand and witnessing the moment his child was born. The press praised them as the new power couple of Hollywood. Clint believed he had finally found the perfect balance. However, life is ironic. The very passionate fire that bonded them was the thing that burned this relationship down the fastest. Frances Fisher was a woman too strong. She did not accept being just a shadow beside a great man. Contradictions in lifestyle and the too big egos of both began to create cracks that could not be healed. And when love ran dry in 1995, instead of a peaceful breakup, they stepped into a worst-case scenario that any parent fears: disputing custody rights. For Clint Eastwood, who always valued control and privacy, having to stand before the family court to fight for the right to see his child, the right to decide the life of the child carrying his bloodline, was an insult. Frances Fisher, with the instinct of a mother and the hurt of an abandoned lover, fought decisively. She did not hesitate to publicize the disagreements, turning family matters into topics of gossip. Clint felt helpless. He could direct hundreds of actors, could control an entire film crew, but he could not order the judge or force the heart of an angry mother. Those days were a long, prolonged chain of stress. Clint remembered the times picking up his child in a stifling atmosphere, the sharp glares, and the sarcastic words from the other side. No longer romantic dinners, no longer smiles on the red carpet, only agreement minutes, visitation schedules, and wariness remained. He realized that when love turns into hatred and the child becomes a weapon for two sides to hurt each other, then no one is the winner. Sitting in the quiet office, Clint Eastwood gently rubbed his temples. Finally, everything also passed. Francesca grew up, and he kept a good relationship with his daughter. But the scar from the legal war of yesteryear is still there. Frances Fisher taught him a bitter lesson, that the woman who once loved him most passionately could also become the most formidable opponent when touching upon the motherly instinct. He sighed, putting Francesca's photo back into the old position. To Clint, Frances Fisher was not a disaster regarding finance or reputation, but a sad low note regarding torn fatherhood. He understood that, no matter how many times he is a hero on the silver screen, in a divorce war with a mutual child, the man is often just a person standing on the sidelines, watching family happiness crumble through the gaps of his fingers without any way to hold on to it. That is the price of breakage that even the toughest cowboy must bow his head to accept. Jill Banner, the catastrophic accident, leaving a permanent soul scar. Clint Eastwood left the desk, where memories of the painful custody battle with Frances Fisher were just evoked, and walked slowly to the balcony. The night wind from the Pacific Ocean blew strongly, carrying a salty taste and a bone-piercing cold. But Clint did not close the door. He needed that cold to paralyze another pain, a pain with no shape, No sound, no court summons or lawyers, but was the deepest wound in his soul. That is the memory of Jill Banner, the only woman whose departure was not due to the breakage of love, but due to the cruelty of fate. Clint leaned against the wooden railing, his eyes looking far away into the thick fog. In his mind appeared the image of Jill Banner in the late years of the 60s. She was not like any woman he had ever met. She did not have the haughty beauty of silver screen stars, nor the resignation of Maggie Johnson. Jill was a strange, wild, and enchanting creature, with big, round, innocent eyes but containing an underground madness. She was compared to a female version of Marlon Brando. It was exactly that erratic, intense nature and instinctual acting of hers in the horror movie Spider Baby that made Clint attracted right from the first look. Their love affair happened in secret but burned passionately. Clint, who was already a big star then, found in Jill a freedom he always craved. She did not care about his reputation or money. She loved him with a primal and most fervent affection. But that very wildness was also a barrier. Jill was like a fire too big, capable of warming, but also capable of burning everything around. They broke up, but never truly severed the connection in terms of soul. Clint always watched over her, worried for her like a brother, an old lover, and a soulmate. However, destiny struck a fatal blow in 1982. Clint recalled that fateful morning when the phone bell rang, tearing apart the peace. On the other end of the line was a trembling voice announcing the bad news Jill Banner had met with a catastrophic traffic accident on the Ventura Highway, California. Her small car had collided with a truck. She passed away when she was only 35 years old. That news came to Clint like a punch of 1,000 pounds into his chest. He, the man dubbed the cold-faced guy of Hollywood, who never revealed a weakness before the public, was completely stunned. There was no enemy holding a gun, no lawsuit, only the eternal silence of death. He could not believe that the woman full of vitality, who once made him laugh, made him go crazy because of her insolence, was now just a name on a cold stone stele. Clint recalled the days after that. He sank into torment. He asked himself if he could have done anything differently if they hadn't broken up. If he stayed by her side, would that tragedy have happened? The what-if questions obsessed him every night. Jill Banner did not leave him hatred or bitterness like Sandra Locke. She left him an immense empty space that could not be filled. Her sudden departure was a cruel reminder that even if he is an invincible hero on film, he is still completely helpless before the scythe of the Grim Reaper. Standing before the Carmel night wind, Clint Eastwood shuddered slightly. He raised his hand to stroke his face, feeling like he could still hear the clear, enchanting laughter of Jill somewhere in the wind. In the list of terrible loves of his life, Jill Banner lies in a separate position. It was terrible not because of betrayal or dispute, but because it left a permanent regret. That was the most tragic love, where he learned that the most painful wound is not a bleeding wound, but a wound caused by a person leaving this world when too young, carrying along a part of the soul of the person staying behind. Clint turned his back to step into the house, closing the balcony door, as if wanting to prevent the cold of the past from continuing to gnaw at his old heart any further. Roxanne Tunis, the earth-shaking secret about the love child, buried for 25 years. Clint Eastwood closed the balcony door, blocking the cold wind stream from the Carmel Sea trying to sneak into the room. He walked back to the desk, but this time did not sit down on the chair, but stood silently in front of the lowest drawer, where he rarely opened. His hand trembled as he inserted the tiny key into the brass lock that had tarnished over time. Click. The drawer popped open, revealing a stack of old papers and a few black and white photos yellowed by time. He picked up a photo of a woman with a gentle smile, standing huddled backstage of a dusty Western film set. That was Roxanne Tunis, the woman who accepted being his shadow for a quarter of a century and was the mother of the secret daughter he buried most carefully in his life. The flow of memory took Clint back to the mid-60s, the time he was a rising star with the role of Cowboy Rowdy Yates in the hit TV series Rawhide. At that time, he was still the legal husband of Maggie Johnson, building the image of a model family man. But behind the camera lens, in the tent set up temporarily in the midst of the burning desert, another life was taking place. Roxanne Tunis was not a silver screen star. She was a stunt woman, a strong and resigned woman. She loved Clint with a dumb love, accepting standing in the dark so his halo could shine completely. In 1964, that secret became visible and knew how to cry. The baby Kimber Eastwood was born. For any father, the birth of a child is a bursting happiness that needs to be shown to the whole world. But for Clint Eastwood at that time, the crying sound of Kimber entering the world was like the siren of a time bomb that could destroy everything. In the conservative 60s, a movie star having an illegitimate child while having a wife was an unforgivable scandal, strong enough to bury his just blooming career to the bottom of the abyss. Clint recalled the days living in permanent fear and lies. He had to create a perfect drama. Kimber was registered for birth under the surname of Roxanne's ex-husband to blind the eyes of the world. Clint became a ghost father, only able to visit his child secretly at deserted hours, always having to look front and back like a criminal in hiding. He provided money, bought a house, ensured mother and daughter Roxanne a materially wealthy life, but stripped them of the most important thing, a title. Throughout 25 long years, Roxanne Tunis kept this secret like a blood oath. She never demanded, never appeared in the press, and absolutely never disturbed Clint's official marriage. That sacrifice was so great that it made Clint, a seasoned philanderer, also have to feel remorse. He had turned the woman who loved him into an accomplice in a great public deception case. While he walked alongside his wife on the red carpet, receiving prestigious awards, Roxanne and her daughter had to retreat into the shadows, looking at their father, their husband through the cold TV screen. But paper cannot wrap fire. In 1989, at the same time the legal war with Sandra Locke broke out, the National Enquirer newspaper exposed this shocking truth. The article headline printed boldly the name Kimber Eastwood like a slap struck straight onto Clint's moral mask. The family man image collapsed completely. The public was stunned to realize their idol not only committed adultery, but also hid an entire second family for so many years. Standing in the quiet office, Clint stroked his finger lightly on the face of the woman in the photo. Roxanne Tunis just passed away last summer, carrying a whole life of silent sacrifice to the other world. She never sued him like Sandra, never sold him out to get money. She only silently loved and silently left. That noble silence is the thing punishing Clint most heavily. He realized that, in the list of terrible loves of his life, the relationship with Roxanne Tunis was worst in the moral aspect. He was not a victim of gold digging or love madness, but he himself was the villain who exploited the trust and love of a good woman. He forced her to live the life of an invisible person so he could play the hero before the public. That is a debt of gratitude that no matter how many Oscar golden statues or how many $1 million in the account, Clint Eastwood can never pay off. He carefully placed the photo back into the drawer, locked it tight like how he locked tight the piedras, then sighed a heavy breath, ending the long night facing the ghosts of conscience at Mission Ranch. What do you think about these hidden corners full of obstacles of the legend Clint Eastwood among the 6 roses who passed through his life? Which story leaves you with the most contemplation? Is it the secret and sacrifice for 25 years of Roxanne Tunis? Is it the cruel, uncompromising legal war with Sandra Locke? Or is it the tragic ending, full of obsession, of Jill Banner? Do not hesitate to leave your viewpoint under the comment section. We really want to hear the thoughts of you guys. And if you find this video brings a fresh, deeper perspective on cinematic monuments, please give us a like, press subscribe to the channel, and share this story with friends with the same interests. Thank you guys for accompanying the flow of memories of the old cowboy. See you again in the next behind-the-scenes stories.